But was it a bad gaffe? Well, at the time for me it was quite a big surprise. Is it a good target? It may well be a good target.
Tony Blair's office told us it wasn't a gaffe, but a decision to protect the environment and help energy security. Mistake or masterstroke, it is now part of a pricey target.
Our estimates of how much needs to be spent to hit the target is about £25 billion a year. That's 1 1/3 Crossrails a year, 2.5 Olympic Games a year, 2.5 times the budget of NASA. In fact, we could sort of say goodbye to windmills and launch our own Mars mission if we wanted to for the same amount of money.
Back on Earth, here's what passes for mission control in the quest to rewire Britain. Well, the information on this screen is becoming increasingly important. It shows the weather and particularly the wind speed across the country. However it's generated, National Grid's job is to make sure there's always power behind the switch. And this is the second big element fueling your rising electricity bill. £17 billion to wire up the changing network. Alan Smart from National Grid is paid to make sure our tellies, toasters and kettles keep running.
For a conventional generator, you know when it's going to start generating, you know how quickly it's going to increase its output. With wind, it's when the wind arrives, and it's when the wind changes, and it's when the wind goes away.
And there's another problem with new forms of power: geography.
Traditionally, the power stations have been in the centre of the country. New power stations, new nuclear power stations around the coast, wind farms offshore, all of that power is coming at the edge of the power system. And we've got to transport that power reliably to the centres of demand.
That means more of these. The National Grid is planning 214 miles of pylons spread through many parts of the country, from Suffolk to Cumbria. Down in the Somerset levels, the steel giants will stride through an area of outstanding natural beauty. The new nuclear reactor at Hinkley Point is pointless without connection to the grid. And this consequence of our energy revolution is not only expensive, but ugly, triggering a fierce backlash.
You care about the environment, you care about the countryside, and you care about the next generation. And we don't want to leave them a landscape despoiled by pylons.
These protesters, like many communities facing new pylon runs, want the cables underground.
In the end, this sounds like a classic, you don't want this in your view. It couldn't be more not in my backyard.
No, this is a totally national issue. This is coming across the whole of the country. What we want to do is do that in the way which is right for the 21st century.
And by right, you mean invisible, in effect, don't you?
Yeah, put them out of sight. We do that with our water mains, we do that with our gas mains, why not with electricity?
National Grid described their position on burying cables as neutral, and they're still consulting with the local community. But they want people to be aware that undergrounding will cost us all.
Well, for this power line through Somerset, to underground it in its entirety would cost around £1 on every domestic consumer's bill for the next 40 years. You're talking about £100 million as opposed to £1 billion underground. £1 billion's an awful lot of money.
So now we have two steps to higher bills: pricey green energy, costly cables. And here's the third. A quarter of our power stations are so old they need replacing, including this nuclear plant at Hinkley Point.
So how far beneath my feet is the actual hot stuff?
Yeah, we're about 10 to 15 metres beneath here.
Right.
So that's where the nuclear reaction is taking place.
It's a strange mix of the high-tech and quite old, isn't it? You look around, you see the telephones and things.
That's right.
They look like out of a period drama, some of those, don't they?
But over the 35 years, the important nuclear safety-related equipment has been constantly refurbished.
Atomic energy is virtually zero carbon, fitting with modern aspirations. So the government wants 8 new nuclear power stations. But attracting the money to build them won't be easy.
Nuclear power carries a set of unique risks. It carries an extraordinarily high construction risk, a high safety risk, as we've just witnessed from Fukushima. So we have an accident due to an earthquake and a tsunami in Japan, and in Germany they decide to instantly close a whole set of nuclear power stations. And that means it's very, very difficult to price that risk, and therefore very difficult for investors to get involved.
Yet, despite these high potential costs and existing controversy, nuclear power is gaining support, even from the Green Wing, if a little grudgingly.
I don't actually like nuclear power, and I would much rather we didn't have to have nuclear power. But the problem is, I like the alternatives even less. And it's become very clear to me that much as I dislike nuclear power, if we don't replace our nuclear power stations, we will have no option but to invest in more fossil fuel.
The government is proposing a guaranteed price for nuclear. It's a sweetener to encourage building so they meet their carbon-cutting targets. We'll pay for the sugar, but do we know that?
The government can't be passive about any of this. If it's going to invest heavily in new wind, it's going to have to make the political case for it. If it's going to invest heavily in new nuclear, it's going to have to make the political case for it. It can't pretend that it can just drift along and expect people to accept stuff when they're not being told why it's a good idea to accept it.
So, is the government in denial about the heavy burden their policies will put on consumers?
You are reducing the production from the cheaper sources of electricity, and government policy is going to increase production from the more expensive. Well, that is a fact, isn't it?
It's not a fact, because the key thing, if that was...
It is a fact. I mean, the figures are from your report.
It's not a fact, because the key point is it's not just now that we have to worry about. When you make investments in energy, you're making investments for 10, for 20, for 30 years. What I can say, and give the assurance, is that at any given point, the total effect of government policies, including the energy saving reduction, is going to be to make sure bills are lower than they would otherwise be.
That's a promise,
but overall, it's an assurance that we can give, because we will make sure at each point that that's the case.
So, on that vexed issue of future energy bills, let's look at what we've been dealt. Well, first off, three of a kind. The high cost of low carbon, the huge expense of power station rebuild, and pricey pylons to hook them all up. But Chris Huhne says he's also got a couple of aces up his sleeve. Policies to help us save energy and also to protect us against soaring global fuel prices. But is all that really going to be enough to make our energy affordable? There is room for most homes to save energy and money, but enough to offset the price hikes? This is the Boaty family of St Albans.
I've started to become the grumpy old man. I go around turning the lights off and everything and having to go at the children for leaving things on, sort of coming back and saying, "Oh, the house is lit up like a
Christmas tree."
Christmas tree.
Well, lovely wood.
In fact, Paul's become so switched on about minimising his heating bill, he's taken fuelling the house into his own hands.
We take the dog for a walk in the woods, then we just pick up suitable pieces of wood lying down, bring it back, and we use that to burn in the winter. This would be a nice piece to have.
Yeah, saves the money. It's free. It's
It's
here lying in the woods.
Yeah, it's just here lying around.
At home, alongside the woodpile, they've lagged the loft, double glazed, and dwell in sofa sleeping bags. But even that's not enough.
How are you finding paying your bills at the moment, your energy bills?
Well, I think we're finding it's becoming increasingly a struggle.
Yes.
A concern, I think. And I think the days of cheap energy and things are over. And the sooner everybody realises it, and we start planning for that, the better.
Stealing ashore under the cover of darkness is the other threat Chris Huhne is pledging to fight. Pricey foreign gas. He says we'll need less if we grow our own green power.
One challenge is to get us in a position where we're less vulnerable to the sort of big price increases for oil and gas that we've seen over the last year. If we can get to a situation where we're using less energy and the energy that we are using is coming from renewable and nuclear sources rather than just from fossil fuels, then we're going to be less vulnerable to that sort of buffeting.
On this tanker is liquefied natural gas from Qatar. Now the ship has safely docked, they can begin piping off the gas, which at this stage is still a super-cooled liquid, actually flowing through these pipes. It'll take about 24 hours to discharge the whole vessel before the gas flows off down those pipes. And there's enough in here to heat nearly 5 million homes for a week. But could Chris Huhne's foe turn out to be more friendly in the future?
There are good reasons to think that the gas and even perhaps the oil price may well fall. That's good news for customers. But if we're pushing out of those areas, particularly out of gas, into a crash course on wind, given the costs of that wind, the bills are going to go up a lot.
But wouldn't dashing back into gas mean abandoning our climate change goals? Not according to accountancy firm KPMG, who explain in a report out this week that by moving rapidly from coal to gas and growing wind more slowly, we could hit our carbon targets but save the public £34 billion, saving the world for less.
We need to get to a position where we can look consumers in the eye and say, we have spent the least amount of money possible to give you power, while still also doing the things we need to do for the benefit of all around carbon and around renewables targets. And I think our research would indicate that there is a gap there, that actually we could spend less money, and therefore I'm not sure we could look the consumers in the eye right now and honestly say we're spending the least amount possible that we need to.
But the man orchestrating the gamble isn't blinking.
Government policy overall, taking the low carbon and energy saving policy, will have a lowering effect on bills. Now, bills may go up because of world market prices, because of the need for investment, all the rest of it, but the overall effect of government policy will be to lower bills compared with what would happen otherwise.
In my view, the government are storing up tremendous problems for themselves unless they are entirely open, entirely honest with consumers about what this is costing today and what it'll be costing in 5, 10 and 20 years' time. Because it seems to me that the consumers will not pay these higher bills unless they fully understand what's being spent, why it's being spent.
The government's next chance to be straight with bill payers like Paula McCrudden and the Boaty family comes this month in the Energy Statement, which includes a forecast of future bills.
How do the policymakers think that sitting around in a house where you're spending 10% of your income on gas and electricity to heat your house, that you're going to be happy with another X% on top of that? How are they going to cope? Who's going to pay for that? These are real life problems for ordinary people.
As public anger rises, politicians